I'm looking good.
Next up, we have F-Zero, a launch title for the Super Nintendo/Super Famicom that was released in 1990 in Japan, 1991 in North America, and 1992 in Europe. The game was produced by the legend himself, Shigeru Miyamoto, who needs no introduction. After all, he's the father of the Italian plumber that we know today. Today we'll see if F-Zero still holds up to this day, or has the game not aged well with the passage of time. So let's find out. But before we can begin our review, I would like to announce that I have a Discord server that you guys can join in, where you can share your gaming thoughts, ask me some questions, hang out, and posting memes. The invitation link is not only in the description below, but will also be in the comments below. So without further ado, let's begin our review, shall we? When it was released, F-Zero left many people who had an NES jaw-dropped with the excitement, and for very good reason. It was like nothing we have never seen before. Thanks to the power of the Super Nintendo, the game was using some 3D wizardry that was very cool and blew people away. But how they achieved that impossible feat, you might ask? Well, you see, the Super Nintendo has 8 graphics modes. The last one, named Mode 7, is a unique layer compared to the other modes that allows the layer to be scaled or rotated, giving the game more of a pseudo 3D effect. Though this graphical method was more designed for racing games like F-Zero and Super Mario Kart in mind, it was still used in other non-racing games like Final Fantasy VI, Axel, and many others. As a result, this feature became the SNES' most iconic selling point among other things, which made F-Zero stand out against other racing games at the time, and put them to shame. Now, if you want to go into full detail about Mode 7 and other graphical modes for the Super Nintendo, then I suggest you watch Modern Vintage Gamer's video about how graphics work on the Super NES. It's a very great video to watch, trust me, it is. With all that said, surely F-Zero excelled in the gameplay department with these fancy graphics, right? Right? Well, the answer is yes. Yes, they did. F-Zero's gameplay was, and still to this day, very good and fast-paced, with cars running around 435 km per hour for the most part, and even sometimes over 900, which made the fastest racing game ever released at the time, and it doesn't end there though. F-Zero revolves around racing anti-gravity cars around futuristic courses, which as a result of this, the cars control very differently compared to other racing games at the time, which made F-Zero very unique. It takes time to get used to it, but it's very easy to learn and master. For example, you have the B button which accelerates your car, A button allows you to use boosts, X and Y makes the car brake, the shoulder buttons allows you to shift weight to either left or right, which is very important to use them when dealing with sharp turns or avoiding obstacles. The up and down buttons points the car nose up and down. This is also very important as when you use the jump plates, your car will reach its top speed. However, in order to retain that speed that you've gained, you need to use the down button to point the car's nose up, otherwise you will lose speed. Not only that, but using this technique also helps you reach certain areas around the tracks that are impossible to reach in normal ways. For instance, in White Land 2, there's a jump that you need to make. However, if you don't press the down button, it's 100% guaranteed that you will lose regardless what car you choose. As a kid, I really struggled on that track until I realized that I had to press the down button to jump even further. And trust me, I've learned this the hard way. As you start the game, you have two options. Grand Prix, which is very self-explanatory, and Practice allows you to practice your skills if you want to win the championship. After selecting either mode, you can pick your own car. You have the option of 4 cars: Blue Falcon, Golden Fox, Wild Goose, and Red Stingray. Each of these cars feel very different. For example, Blue Falcon is very balanced, Golden Fox has very high acceleration, but it's awful at handling corners, not to mention that it's very fragile. Wild Goose is a bit stronger and faster than these two cars, but it's still a very slippery car when cornering around the tracks. Then we have the Fire Stingray, which despite having the worst acceleration in the game, it has the best top speed in the game, clocking around 478 km per hour, and it takes corners like a boss, as it has the highest grip in the game. It's actually my personal favorite car, and it's great for the harder races in the game. After selecting your car, you can choose what league you want to participate. There's 3 leagues: Knight, Queen, and King League. Each league consists of 5 races. You can also choose the difficulty, which basically affects the AI of the rivals. During the races, after each lap, you get a speed boost, which, you guessed it, makes the car go faster. Using them in certain places is the key to victory. Just don't use them in tight corners, otherwise your car will turn into a bump car fiesta and then some. Speaking of that, your car also has a health meter. If you take enough damage, your car will lose its potential, such as having a hard time to reach its top speed, and so on and so forth. If the meter gets completely depleted, your car will explode, losing the race as a result, and you only have 3 chances, and if you waste them all, the game is over and you have to restart the championship all over again. Another way you can destroy your car is by landing outside of the tracks, which results in your car getting blown out. Luckily, you can replenish your health by entering these green tiles that will recover your health, which is pretty neat. There's also a scoring system. The game gives you points based on how well you do during the races. Getting 10k points will grant you an extra life, which is pretty good. Not only that, after each lap, which by the way, each race has 5 laps, and after each lap, you need to be in or better than the falling position. If you fall below a certain rank, you will get disqualified and you have to start the race again. There's also hazards that will appear in some tracks that you need to avoid, like landmines, side pull magnets, down pull magnets, and flashing cars that will explode upon contact with the player dealing damage. For me, I had no issue avoiding these pesky hazards since I've played this game so many times that I can avoid them with ease. Anyway, to win a championship, you need to place at least 3rd place in each race, and if you complete any league on the expert class, you will unlock a secret difficulty, the master class, which is where the real fun begins. You thought that the expert class was hard as balls? You haven't seen anything yet, buddy. Speaking of difficulty, nowadays F-Zero isn't that hard, especially compared to the other entries in the franchise, but it still offers a good challenge for newcomers who are going to play this game for the first time. If you're going to play it for the first time, I recommend playing it on standard class to get used to the mechanics and so on, then proceeding to the expert class once you get good at this game. Like I said before, beating any league on expert will unlock the master difficulty, and in order to beat this class, you better make sure that your driving skills are on point, since the AI is pretty aggressive, and if you make one mistake, it's likely your fault. In Master Class, the Fire Stingray is the preferable car of choice since it has the best grip and speed in spite of its low acceleration. Granted, you can use the other 3 cars, but they are not as good as the Fire Stingray. Granted, the Blue Falcon and Wild Goose are viable, but the Golden Fox is not. Sure, it has the best acceleration in the game, but on the other hand, it has the worst top speed and grip, making it nigh impossible to winning these races in the Master Class. And God forbid that you use that car on Death Wind 1 and 2, since these tracks are oval based, and the car has the lowest top speed of the 4 cars you choose in the game, and the chances of reaching first place in that track are impossible. Worth mentioning that you shouldn't use the boosts at once. Use them in tight situations, which could be very useful. If you win a league on the Master Class, you will be greeted by a message saying that you are a F-Zero Master, which is pretty neat. Once it's over, you're pretty much done with the entire game. Well, you still have practice mode, of course. Now, with all the good points mentioned in the gameplay department, F-Zero does have some little issues. The game lacks any multiplayer support, which kinda hurts the replay value of this game. Now granted, this was a launch title for the SNES, but still having split screen multiplayer could have made the game better. Another problem I have with this game is the practice mode. The mode itself is not bad, but the track selection is pretty limited since you can't race on all the tracks in the game, which kinda sucks. Speaking of tracks, F-Zero has 15 tracks, which for the time when the game was released, it was a big deal. Like I said before, the roster is divided into 3 leagues. There are many great tracks in this game, like the iconic New City, which has 3 versions depending which league you're racing on. Big Blue, Sand Ocean, Silence, and Port Town are pretty cool design-wise. Deathwind 1 and 2 are the bane of everyone's existence. At first you might say, well, it's an oval bass track, that should be a piece of cake, right? Well, not really. You see, Deathwind has one gimmick, and that is, it has strong wind effects that will affect all the machines in the track. Not only that, but there's also dash panels that you need to use them, otherwise you will definitely fall behind, especially on the master difficulty. But wait, there's more! Deathwind also has another version of the track which is present on the King League, and it's even more harder than the previous version, due to more complex corners. Not to mention that the dash panels are now a death trap, since using these panels will lead you to disasters, as you can see in this footage. Then we have Firefield, which is the hardest track in the game, but for the right reasons, since this track makes the player use all the skills they have learned in the prior two leagues, and also it's the final track in the game, so it's obvious that it's going to be the hardest. Like I said before, the graphics in F-Zero look marvelous for a 16-bit game, especially with that sweet Mode 7 graphics. Now, you might be wondering, did these graphics make the frame rate tank? Nope. The game ran at a fantastic 60 frames per second, which was an excellent feature, especially for a fast-paced racing game like F-Zero. And this is even more impressive considering that this was a fucking launch title for the Super Famicom. Nice job, Nintendo! The soundtrack of F-Zero is phenomenal, composed by Yumiko Kanaki and Naoto Ishida, who composed the soundtrack of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Brawl, and Melee. The soundtrack of this game compared to the other soundtrack of other F-Zero games is pretty different. The franchise is famous for having kick-ass rock soundtracks, but in this game, the soundtrack is more on the jazz side. In fact, there was a jazz album of F-Zero released 2 years after the game in Japan, so that's pretty neat. That's not to say that the soundtrack is bad. Like I said, I really like the soundtrack of the original F-Zero, and it's one of the soundtracks that really defines the Super Nintendo in the music department. The sound effects are fine for a 16-bit game, the engine sounds are pretty well made, as well as the rest of the car sound effects. So, was F-Zero any good? Well, it's definitely one hell of a game, a launch title no less, as it showcased how good was Mode 7 actually, and it delivered with bright colors. Its gameplay is still solid even to this day, although it could have been much better if it had split screen multiplayer. Even so, it's still a good game to play. And even though its sequels outclassed it in terms of gameplay and content, the original F-Zero played a huge role when it came to the success of the Super Nintendo. So much so, in fact, that it's one of the best Super Nintendo games ever made, and had not the game been successful, the franchise would have been doomed from the start. So overall, F-Zero is one hell of a solid racing game, and it's one of the most important games in the Super Nintendo library. If you're liking this video, smash that like button and subscribe for more awesome content. Also, don't forget to join my Discord server, link in the description below, to hang out with me and the community. And that's all folks, see you next time!